Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news, the story behind the story, hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at and that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that'll determine what the future will bring. And I have to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman, who's on the line, and we hope to have him here in just a moment or two. But right now, of course, we're going to be talking about what is happening financially across America. And, of course, we're always told, well, things are getting better, the economy is really booming. Look at all the people out there buying, and they're in the stores buying, and they're buying all those things, and that's wonderful for the American economy. And I would like to suggest it's not wonderful for the American economy, because, of course, all of the electronic things you buy there are made overseas. This is creating jobs, but it's creating jobs in Taiwan and China. And certainly textiles, the clothing, people are buying clothing, but when they buy clothing, that, of course, helps the people in Malaysia, where they do so much of the stitch work, and some places in China. And basically what you don't understand is that the globalists have intentionally and maliciously and purposely shipped our major industries offshore, our steel industry, our smokestack industries, our textile industry, our electronic industry, our automotive industry, or most of our automotive industry. They've shipped the aluminum industry, the light bulb industry, like some of our agriculture. Certainly garlic used to be, the garlic, Gilroy was the garlic capital of the world, but now it's somewhere over by Beijing. They know what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. They want to impoverish this country. They've impoverished the people in the Central Valley of California by shutting down the water to the farmers there because they wanted to protect the 3-inch smelt. No, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to destroy the agriculture. And when you understand that, it all makes sense. But people get mad if they found out the truth. So we're going to tell them, it's the smelt. It's the smelt. We got to save the smelt. Hi, Bob Chapman. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. And I don't know what we're going to do about those smelt.
Well, the first thing we ought to do, we need a governor who'll say to the federal government, you have no authority to do this. We're not going to let you do it. And you want to come out here and protect the smelt, you will protect it. But I'm going to use my authority as the governor to override anything done by the EPA, which is an unconstitutional and illegal organization that's harming and poisoning the American people. And we're not going to put up with it. And if we had a governor who had the courage to do that, rather than the wimp we have in there now, the girly boy, why, of course, if Arnold Schwarzenegger was a real man, he would have stood up to the federal government. He's not. He's a coward. Go right ahead, Bob.
Well, how about the new Governor Moonbeam?
It's going to be very interesting to see, but I don't know whether he'll have the courage to stand up or not. We'll find out very soon. But what he really plans to do is to destroy the state. He is going to put in a budget, a balanced budget, and he's going to lay off all sorts of teachers and government employees and start closing the prisons and turning the prisoners loose. And then he's going to come to the people and say, see now, it's all your fault. You've just got to vote for higher taxes. And he's going to come up with a new tax bill in May or June. And I'm just hoping and praying, of course, that some of those prisoners go to visit Governor Moonbeam and that, of course, he gets voted down on his taxes. Basically, what they want to do is destroy the state and say, well, you're just going to have to give us more money so we can continue having Cadillacs for the members of the assembly. Go right ahead.
I can remember back in the 60s living in California that they did not get paid to be senators and congressmen in the state of California. I mean, they got nothing.
Well, they were probably there for the right purpose then.
Well, they were.
But what I would like to do would put through an initiative that they would hold sessions about 6 weeks out of every year, and then they couldn't do as much damage as they're doing. We'll be back here in just a moment with Bob Chapman. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, and I guess this afternoon is Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, and Bob is going to keep us abreast of what is really going on in the world today. Bob, what's your take on what's going on over in Europe?
Well, I think you can compare the problems in Greece, Ireland, and Portugal, Belgium too, with the problems that they have in the States, in the United States. In fact, you can even include Italy and Spain in that, because California has got a far bigger economy than they have. And you've got about 40 states in financial problems, and probably 30 of them are really on the edge of bankruptcy, and 10 of them are probably in decent shape, if not good shape.
Did you see Meredith Whitney last night by any chance on 60 Minutes? It was well worthwhile seeing, or maybe if you have the internet you can watch her. But basically she just says, that the bank, this is the next big problem. Nobody's talking about it. But she echoes what you're saying, and that is that a number of these banks, a number of the states and a number of the communities are going to go bankrupt, and that municipal bonds and state bonds are a very, very dangerous proposition.
Well, I got people out of the municipals 3 years ago when I saw the problems that came to AMBAC and the other company that insures bonds, I forget the name of it, which is still in business. And AMBAC just went bankrupt. And what AMBAC and the other company, and there's a few small ones, but they did 85% of the business. And what they did was they insured the municipals. And in that process, if you had Town A and they wanted to issue some bonds and they had a triple B rating, with this insurance they would assume the AAA rating, and they pay lots less money for their bonds, to raise money. And well, when AMBAC went under, they lost that, so they reverted back in the marketplace to the triple B level, which means they might have gone from par to $900 a bond. That was just the beginning. And, I see people trying to get out of municipals now, and they're having a heck of a time being, a seller. The prices are dropping terribly, and it's going to continue. So if any of you out there have municipal bonds and you want to talk to me about it, email me.
Hold that thought. We'll be back
Sure.
in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Bob is simply talking about the municipal bond market. Basically, if you didn't see 60 Minutes last night with Meredith Whitney talking about the fact that the municipal bonds are going to get into very, very real problems, why you can probably see that up on the internet, a replay. But then, of course, Bob is just saying, if you're out there and you're sitting on municipal bonds and you're having difficulty getting out of them, because a lot of people are, why? Because, of course, as the interest rate on the bond goes up because they have to pay more money, because people realize that the municipalities could very well default. They'll lose everything. So people are trying frantically to get out of their bonds. They're having difficulty. Bob says if you'll simply send him an email, he'll give you some suggestions. Go right ahead.
Well, that address is Bob, B-O-B, at INTFORECASTER.com. Bob at intforecaster.com. And I'll, be as helpful as I can for you. And but you need to get out. We don't know who's going under. Many of them will go under. You'll never get paid. You'll lose your money. And you don't want to do that, of course. And so the offer is open. But anyway.
Well, now, Bob, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to default? Do you think they'll pay 50 cents on the dollar, 25 cents on the dollar, or just simply nothing on the dollar?
It's going to vary from place to place. And I don't know how to answer it because, the real estate values are falling dramatically, and they're still falling. And that's not going to get better. And the housing market will probably go down, the way I see it at the moment, probably go down 20% in the next couple of years, maybe even more. And then when it hits a bottom, and hopefully it'll hit a bottom by the beginning of 2013, it'll be a minimum of 8 years before there's any resuscitation, we'll call it. And then after that, we'll be looking at maybe another 10 or 20 years before recovery comes. We've had a boom in housing since World War II, really started around 1948, and it was a way of making money because we had perpetual inflation, and that game is over. Houses are to live on, not to be speculated with, and that moves money into bonds, into the stock market, and the majority of wealth that Americans had was in their homes. And, somebody built a home for $120,000 and it went to $500,000, and now it's back down to, let's say, $230,000. That wealth that people had is gone. And, there's not an awful lot of people in the stock market anymore, so there's no real wealth for them there. They have retirement plans, but they're all in the stock market and the bond market, so they're going to get crushed. And then the companies that are holding your retirement are going to say, gee, the market just fell down to 3,000 on the Dow, and we can't pay you $1,000 a month anymore. We only can pay you $300. And those kind of things are going to happen. And it could be even worse than that. And the Fed knows that. Bernanke wrote a paper in 1988 along with Mike Boskin, both economists, Bernanke being the head of the Fed now. And they said that what Bernanke's doing can't work. So you say to yourself, why is he doing it? He's doing it because they don't have any other alternative. I think they've lost a good part of their control. And that's borne out by these bailouts in Europe. There's an alpha group, which is royal families in Europe for all intents and purposes. The leader of the pack is the Queen of England. And as an example, they own those two banks in Ireland. The money that was given by the EU and the Eurozone and the IMF went to the Irish government to bail the banks out. It wasn't to pay any debts or anything that the Irish had, the people.
But of course, what they should have done was let those banks go down. Basically, why would you want to suddenly indebt the Irish people for decades to pay off the debts incurred by irresponsible banks owned by the Queen and by people of great wealth? I mean, that is totally immoral. I hope the Irish people are certainly going to repudiate that and repudiate their government that's betrayed them.
Well, the government will be thrown out, there's no question. But, England has been doing this to Ireland and Scotland for centuries, for the last more than 1,000 years. And it hasn't stopped. They just keep on doing it. And
but for the Irish people don't have to accept it. They could just say, we're not going to go along with this. We're not going to bail out the banks. They got themselves in this mess. They had to go under. That's what they did in Iceland. In fact, they put some of the people in prison. And they probably ought to put some of the owners of that bank in prison as well.
Well, I agree with you. That's a good idea. But I told them on radio over there that I think they should walk away from the debt. And we reach a lot of people over there. We have a lot of subscribers in Ireland and England and not so many in Scotland. But they may very well do that. And so we've got now 6 countries that are definitely going under in Europe. It all depends on when. And I think that Greece and Ireland will come to a head by June, and I think Portugal and Belgium will follow during that time frame, and Spain will be in the same boat, and maybe even Italy, because you look at the premiums on the swaps, and you see that the buyers and sellers of the swaps, they think that there's a good possibility that Italy will go with the others. Well, gee, then you say to yourself, we've got 6 countries here. out of 16, I mean, are they going to take, is their demands going to take Germany and France and Holland and Austria down with them? Maybe. And the other countries involved don't mean anything. I mean, they're too small. And so it's terminal. The euro is going to go down, and probably the European Union.
Well, of course, basically,
and just like the states in the United States.
Well, basically, here's what they're saying is, well, what we need to do is have everybody give up their national sovereignty, and then France and Germany are going to come on board and finance everybody, and we're going to just unite everybody's debt into one big happy family, and then, of course, without sovereignty, we can manage the debt, and certainly. But I don't know whether Germany and France are going to go along with that. Do you think they will?
No. In fact, what they're deathly afraid of in Germany right now is demonstrations and riots. They're deathly afraid of it. And England was too, and they raised tuitions, calculated risk, and so what did they do? They rioted, the students. And you really don't want to have students rioting. This is the age group that fights wars. They're healthy and they're strong, and they're not dumb, that's for sure, university kids. And so England's got a real problem there. And then we have the dislocations in Greece, and it just goes on. And it's not going to get better. I covered it in the last issue at the beginning, and I'm writing a part about it again. It's a very serious situation, and it could create the atmosphere that might cause the same thing to happen in the United States. I mean, you've got, 44 million people on food stamps. And I found out today that guess who's running the food stamp program?
Who?
J.P. Morgan Chase. And they're making a fortune out of it.
Sure.
I mean, you talk about incestual relationship.
But of course, who runs J.P. Morgan Chase? And I noticed in your last forecaster that you were referring to some work that had been done from some fellow on who owns the banks. You didn't go into it in a great deal of detail, but I followed the lead that you gave me. And of course, it looks like J.P. Morgan Chase, in fact, all of the major American banks are largely held by Barclays and by State Street Bank over in England. And of course, they're controlled by the Rothschilds.
Who are controlled by the British royal family.
Right. Are they? They work together.
They're all in it together.
Right. Okay. Well,
and that's what the Alpha Group's all about. And so, they essentially own the world banking system, more or less.
Well, basically, the Rothschilds and the royal family are working closely together.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. What can you tell us about the Alpha Group?
Just that it's run by the royal families of Europe, and that they own large interests in the major banks throughout Europe and the United States.
And of course, the banks is where the money is, because when you have a bank where you can create money out of nothing, it's the greatest scam in the world. And there are very, very people who understand how this works. The governments create money and they print money, but of course the banks create credit. It's not printed money, but it can be spent. You can certainly take a check to the bank and they'll give you money for it. And people don't understand how this whole system works. This is why it's so vitally important that you get books like The Federal Reserve Conspiracy by Professor Sutton, Creature from Jekyll Island by Ed Griffin. But we have an excellent DVD put out by our good friend William Still. I don't agree with his solution, but boy, it's a great DVD. We're carrying it because he's got all of the information there. And you need to get it. It's called The Secret of Oz. How these people create money out of nothing. And then, of course, they go around and they buy up the corporations, they buy up the media. It's a great scam. Little wonder, of course, the nobility are in on it, and certainly the international financiers. I mean, wouldn't you like to be able to make money out of nothing? We've given them a license to steal, and that's what the Federal Reserve, the central bank's all about. Time we took America back. Well, we still can. We'll be back in just a moment with our good friend Bob Chapman right here at Radio Liberty. Well, our telephone number is 1-888-244-LIBERTY, 1-888-244-LIBERTY, or 464-8295, and here on the Central Coast of California at 475-6651. Here in this, 464-8295, 464-8295, if you'd like to talk to Bob. Well, Sydney, where do we think we stand as far as the states are concerned? Because Meredith Whitney last night on 60 Minutes certainly made it appear that this was fairly imminent, and this whole house of cards of the states and municipalities were going to be coming down this year. Do you think that's possible? I mean, this coming year.
But, the timing is not important. The message is, get out. I mean, what are we going to do, draw your pictures? This is stupid. I mean, the world, most of the people don't have access to the information that we have. We're right 98% of the time. When we tell you to do something, you should do it. We don't get paid to do this. So it's very important when somebody like Meredith Whitney comes on and says, look, this is where this thing is going. You don't want to be there. Get out. Get out. The governor of New Jersey said, get out. Everybody's in trouble. And that means the stock market's going down. The bond market's going down. Yields are going to go up. People are going to lose piles of money. Pension, profit sharing, 401ks, IRAs are going to get slaughtered. When? I don't know. But I do know it's going to happen. So you don't have to know when. You have to pick the trend and be right. That's where it is all at. And you're not going to make it from the bottom to the top or from the top to the bottom. You take the 60 or 70% in between and live happily ever after. I mean, the very famous people who have been in markets, most of them were crooks, but that's irrelevant. They knew what to do. I'm telling you what they told me, and I'm telling you what to do, and that's what it is. Just like I say, gold and silver-related assets as an antithesis to that. You do it. Because otherwise you're going to get crushed. You don't have any choice. Very simple.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that it's so difficult for people to understand that we've always been told that bonds were so conservative. Oh, bonds, this is where you go. You don't want to be in the stock market gambling. Why, you just want a steady income. Without understanding, of course, that when the whole monetary system begins to degenerate, why, of course, bonds are certificates of guaranteed confiscation. I think, is that the term that was used?
Well, almost, but it was Franz Pick.
Franz Pick.
And he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he also said bad money drives out good, and many other things. And nobody would listen to him, except me and a handful of people. And that was 50 years ago. Franz Pick has died 35, 40 years ago. And the work he did lives after him. It's the same sort of thing that you see in the markets today. Nobody's listening, and they hire these experts, and goodness knows I run into them every day, who don't know from a hole in the ground, and they're telling people what to do. It's the same formula that these financial advisors are telling people.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman, the International Forecaster. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. And certainly Bob has been talking for a long time about the importance of getting out of municipal bonds. And, of course, Meredith Whitney last night on 60 Minutes was talking about the fact that these are all going to go bankrupt. The states are going to go bankrupt. A number of our states are sitting on the verge of bankruptcy. In fact, they're worse off than Greece is. And then, of course, we have many of our certainly municipal bonds, our city bonds, our county bonds, our certainly our school bonds, and of course they're dependent upon money coming in, and everything is built upon debt. People don't understand that this is the way they play the game. The banks, of course, make money readily available, and everybody's out buying, and they're investing, and they're buying property so they can roll it over and make money, and they're buying commercial development so they can make money, and they build them, and then, of course, somebody's going to come and rent them, and they'll be able to pay them off in a relatively few years. And they don't understand that the time then comes when the banks suddenly decide to shut the steel trap, and you're there. They've called the loans. They want their money back. You can't make the payment on it. And now what do you do? I mean, you've got a 5-year loan, commercial loan, but at the end of 5 years, you got to refinance it. And what happens if you can't borrow money anyplace? Why, you lose it. Of course, you lose everything you put in that, and this is how they're really wiping people out. Well, our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295, and they've done this over and over again, played that game. Expand the money supply, contract the money supply. Expand the money supply, contract the money supply. It's pretty routine, isn't it, Bob?
It is, and they're running the game. They are the house in the casino. And they know exactly what they're doing. They don't use inside information. They create it. And so they control every game, every facet of the game. And so you're always at a perpetual disadvantage. I mean, what do you think they're having these FBI investigations? Thousands of people who are involved in insider trading. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, how many people are going to go to jail? Thousands. And, of course, none of them are really connected, so it's okay, we'll put them away. But the people who are connected within the Brotherhood of Darkness on Wall Street and in banking, not only here but in England and in Europe, in other places as well, they do what they want to do. They pay a fine, they walk away. It's chump change. So they never get brought on the carpet for what they do. And the company is blamed, not them.
I see what Bank of America is going to put out $137 million for their fraudulent dealings as far as selling these collateralized debt obligations and other fraudulent obligations, and certainly General Motors were doing the same. They were all in on the scam, and these are criminal activities, and yet they're going to give some little guy, who gave a tip on insider information, they're going to send him to jail for a number of years, and these banks that were involved in, frankly, fraudulent, dealings with municipalities and people who bought these collateralized debt obligations, pension funds, insurance policies, they're going to get off scot-free. The money, $135 million that Bank of America is going to pay, is not going to go to pay off the people who got the problem. The government's just going to keep that to meet its deficits. And the people simply lose out. This is the way the game is played.
That's right. And, you look at Warren Buffett as an example. His company, Berkshire Hathaway, defrauded the United States government of $300 million. And they went to court, they lost, and they had to pay $100 million. So they kept $200 million, which is nice work if you can get it, but Warren didn't go to jail.
Well, apparently
he's fine, the company was.
Okay, so he's in with the Rothschilds. We've seen these pictures of him taking Arnold Schwarzenegger over to visit Lord Rothschild before Arnold was allowed to run for the governorship here in California. People don't understand. At that time, when Arnold ran for governor, California was the 6th largest economy in the world. Today it's the 8th largest economy, in large part due to Arnold, and probably if he were to stay on, why did it end up being about the 50th largest economy? But they had to clear that with the ruling elite before Arnold was allowed to run. And we've seen the pictures, I'm sure you've seen them, Bob, of Warren Buffett and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lord Rothschild is laughing and laughing together. And you know what they're laughing at? They're laughing at us common people because we don't understand how the world really runs. But of course, you need to get Bob's latest issue of The Forecaster. He goes into who controls the 10 largest banks in America. And most of the major blocks of stock, the ruling interest in many of them, is controlled not from the United States, but from Europe. Isn't that strange? Our number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. Give us a call.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer.
Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, and right now we've got Ed calling from New Brunswick. Hi, Ed.
If he can estimate, or give me information what's going to happen now. They raised the debt about, 8 billion or more.
What was that now, Ed? I didn't get that.
Here in New Brunswick, yes,
Yes.
was debt, over $4 billion.
Oh, okay. You've got a good debt up there, and how is the economy up in New Brunswick?
Well, pretty scary. Pretty scary, it's quite high unemployment. They're saying it's about 10.5%, but I believe it's more. Yes, I believe it's far more. Yes, and like I'm saying, here was before that 4.5 billion somewhere. This kind of range, and then when previous government or last government had liberal government, had only 3 more billions. Now was election, and this conservative government now, who took over, they don't know what to do with it, kind of actually, because they have to come with some kind of really strict, regulation. I would like to know what Mr. Chapman, if he knows something about it, what he think of it. What is the future here?
What do you think, Bob? Any thoughts?
Well, I lived in New England, and I watched for many years the people come to the United States from the maritime provinces, and it's still happening. There's never enough work, and of course, politicians get at things and they run up debt, and they steal a lot as
they
well.
run it very high, very high.
And
you see, myself personally, I came here to Canada from Europe. I brought money with me. I spent quite a bit of money here right on beginning. And then I used to live in Alberta. From Alberta, I came here to New Brunswick because my wife is from here, right? And I brought quite a bit of money here too. Yes, but I was prevented, to do business here, and I spent lots of money here. And now I find out myself, I'm in debt, and I have no say about it, and no anything what's happened. I was
hold that thought, Ed. We're going to be back here in just a moment here. But
right.
God bless you, and I hope that things get better. But
thank you very much. Thanks to you.
Have a wonderful Christmas.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, Dr. Stan here, and our guest is Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. But right now, of course, before we go on, we have DJ calling from Mount Dora in Florida. But before we get to Dora, Bob, I want you to tell our listeners how, I guess it's DJ calling from Mount Dora in Florida. Bob, before we go on, I want you to tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the International Forecaster.
The Forecaster is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. We publish by email on Wednesdays and Saturdays, runs around 40 pages each time, and we also have a hard copy that goes out twice a month to people who are not on the Internet. And all the news that you need to know each week is in that publication. You can get a free edition by going to our site, theinternationalforecaster.com, theinternationalforecaster.com, or you can go to www.intforecaster.com. That's intforecaster.com. And if you have a question, we answer everyone. Just email us at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. That's Bob at intforecaster.com. If you'd like to call, you can call toll-free for that free introductory copy, and that number is 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
Okay, let's go to DJ calling from Mount Dora, Florida. Hi, DJ. How you doing?
Yeah, Sandy, good to hear your voice. Hey, let me kick this around a little bit. This is not my idea. I heard this on a radio program. There are approximately 1 quadrillion transactions on the stock market. There's stocks, there's bonds, there's derivatives. There's a whole list of them. Anyway, if we taxed every one of those transactions just on the stock market $1, we would get a quadrillion dollars into our treasury. We could pay off the Federal Reserve System, pay off all our debts and everything, and start all over again what the Constitution said back in 1789.
All right, Bob, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, and the UN's been trying to do it for years.
Yeah.
In order to finance their work throughout the world, if you want to put it that way.
But of course, that would not solve our problem. That would destroy our country, because the whole idea of the United Nations is to do away with national sovereignty. I know.
About them. He's talking about the U.S. government doing it. And it's not a bad idea. You know, contrary to what most people know, back in the early to mid 1960s, we had such a transaction tax on all of the trades that went on in the brokerage business. I know, I was there. And so this is not unusual. There is a precedent, and it's a very good idea. And then at the same time, if we could get Congress to put on tariffs on goods and services, we'd never pay any taxes again.
That's right. We financed our whole government with tariffs up until about when Taft was in, and then they started doing away with tariffs, and they lost revenue, so they implemented an income tax.
Well, basically, DJ, you're absolutely right. If we could do it, but the powers that be don't intend that, because they do not want to solve the problem. They do not want us to be a sovereign country. They don't want us to pay out the Federal Reserve. They want to impoverish the American people, and as this thing unfolds, you'll see that's the case. It's a great idea, and the only way anything's going to happen is if we can take America back. But we've got to get the people out there, and they've got to get mad, and they've got to get involved, and they've got to get involved in their local government and their state government, and get sending people to Washington, D.C. who believe in America rather than people who sell their souls for campaign contributions or personal gratuities.
Let's spread that around to the people, because the preamble of our Constitution says we the people, right? So
right.
Let's tell the people about it and get behind it.
God bless.
Anyway,
thanks very much, DJ.
Bye-bye.
Good idea. Let's go to Ed calling from New Brunswick.
Yes,
Ed, you have a quick question?
Yeah, I was asking, the question about Czech Republic, because same time like Ireland was booming, 3 years ago, Czechs did same thing. They was booming, yes? They was looking for workers all over the Europe and beyond, right? And then all of a sudden everything turned upside down. So I would like to know, what is it happen now there?
All right, fine. Basically, Ed is saying things were great 3 years ago. The economy was booming, and now the economy is not doing well. Bob, why did it change up there in New Brunswick?
Well, they borrowed too much money. And that happened because within the Eurozone, one interest rate was good for everybody. Of course, that's not good, but that's what they did. And so Ireland got, like Spain and Portugal, in well over their heads. The bankers kept on giving them money, knowing that the public would pay them back. Very, very bad loans. And then they had a housing bust, and everybody's out of work, and they have poor fiscal atmosphere presently. And on top of it, the two major banks in the country were on the verge of bankruptcy and had to be bailed out. And that's what's going on right now.
And I think the reason things were good 3 years ago was because the banks expanded the money supply and you could borrow money and everybody could invest. The reason things are bad now is because the banks have contracted the money. The banks have done this intentionally and purposely, and that's the tragedy.
Sorry.
Okay.
The Irish, yes, and Czechs, I find out that, 5 years back, the Czechs was also creditors, to some countries, yes.
Right.
So now, the situation there is so different.
Well, basically, the way this is set up is the banks win, we lose. That's the rules of the game, and so you don't want to play the banks game, okay?
Yeah, okay.
God bless him. Thanks so much. Okay, that was it, and I hope we answered his question. But basically, the banks create the financial cycle. Basically, there's a small number of people who control the banking system. I mean, we have 6 major banks. They control, here in the United States, they control the majority of the banking assets. We've got about 8,000 smaller banks, something like that. But the major banks call the tune, and if they want, of course, to lend money, why money gets lent. If they want to contract the money supply, they do that, which is what they're doing. And the smaller banks are under the control of the FDIC, and they're putting real pressure on the smaller banks right now not to loan. I mean, there are all sorts of requirements, and the small banks, get out of line, they'll simply shut them down because they have FDIC really controls those small banks. When was the last time the FDIC closed down one of the big banks? They don't do that. They're above the law. It's only the small banks, and if they're loaning, they're going to get real trouble. What are your thoughts on that, Bob?
Well, you're absolutely right. And the big banks control everything. The big banks are controlled, for the most part, by the royal families of Europe in conjunction with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and that's the way it is.
And I think people
and
really
we've got to change that.
People need to understand that we don't control our own banks. In fact, we're going to control less and less. The Chinese are now over here buying up. They just bought up $150 billion of American corporations. Brazil is buying Sara Lee, Sara Lee goods. Brazil has already bought Burger King. They're buying up American products right now. And of course, this is exactly what our leaders want to do. They want to sell off our infrastructure. And of course, there's not going to be any money here. I mean, the money from Sara Lee, if Sara Lee sells to the Brazilian corporation, the profit will go down to Brazil. Profit from Burger King will go to Brazil. The profit from the 50 corporations China has just bought here in the United States will go back to China. And what will happen to the American people? We'll get poorer and poorer, and when they cut back on Social Security and welfare and Medicare and lower the price of the homes, which is the major source of wealth of the American people, they're going to intentionally and purposely and maliciously, certainly impoverish the American people. That's the plan. Go ahead, Bob. Any thoughts at all?
No, but that's how they're dumping their dollars, and, no better way.
Okay, let's go to Buzz, who's calling from Jacksonville, Florida. Hi, Buzz. Have a question or comment? Is this Buzz? I don't know. Are you there, Buzz?
Dr. Stan, I think you probably pushed the wrong button.
Well, maybe I have. Okay, who am I talking to?
You're talking to Ron up in the Tri-Cities.
All right, fine, Rod.
And you guys aren't coming in on radio.
No, I'm afraid that our satellite is down back in Pennsylvania. It must be the storms back there.
So I called, and I just to let you guys know, and your wife said, "Why don't you listen?" And so she just probably let me listen on the phone.
Okay, fine. So you're on line 3. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Let's see who we have here on line 3. Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
And let's go to Buzz calling from Jacksonville. Oh, hold on. Oh, go ahead, Buzz. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. How are you hearing us? You're listening on shortwave?
Oh, yes. I'm on shortwave radio.
Okay, fine. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have a question. My sources tell me that the new governor, Jerry Brown, in January is projected to cut the budget out there in California by 20%.
You're absolutely right. That's what he's going to do. He's going to just plunge the state into chaos, and then he's going to say, "Now it's your fault, and give me more money." And I just hope that people in California kind of say, "We'll give you more money when the assemblymen give back their Cadillacs, or when the people on Caltrains give their 30% wage raise they've had, or 40% wage raise over the last 3 years. Or we'll do it when you start acting responsibly." But basically, I don't think he's going to get the tax increase through, but they're going to try to manipulate the people into voting for increased taxes. That's what it's all about. He's going to create chaos. He's going to start releasing prisoners, and there's going to be crime all across the country, all across the state. He's going to do everything he can to destroy the state, and then, that's what's going to happen if you don't do what I want. That's the game plan.
Dr. Stan, is it possible that when he does this might signal the start of riots here in the United States? In other words, there might be riots in California?
Could very well be, and especially, if the people vote down the tax increase, and of course I'm going to vote against it. But basically, this is what they want. They're saying, look, you're not going to give us the money. We're going to close down the prisons. We're going to release the prisoners. People are going to die from no health care, and we're going to take away the food from the people. And you're going to see day after day after day on television weeping mothers and weeping fathers and weeping children, and tempo of violence is going to increase. They're going to manipulate the American people into going along what they want them to do.
Thank you, Dr. Stan. That was my comment and question.
Anything else? Okay, fine. Bob, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think that's the scenario. That's the plan.
No, I think it is too. Unfortunate, but it had to come. You and I have been watching it now for 50 years, and it was inevitable. And all I can say is that if people are going to have to make changes in that manner, just make sure that we take care of the people that should be, and make sure they go to jail or they're executed for their crimes if they, in fact, are treason, like our last president. And so I think that's what people should keep in mind, because that's where we're going with this thing.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dr. Stan. God bless both of you.
Thank you so much. And I would simply point out that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there in the listening audience, you live in California, you're going to have to start making plans to look after yourself. Secondly, you're going to have to get involved in helping others, because there are going to be a lot of people who are having real problems out there. Doctors are going to have to start taking care of people, but the local community is going to have to pay their malpractice insurance and give them a place where they can take care of the poor and the indigent. Before we had this wonderful utopian society, every county in the United States had a public hospital, a county hospital, where people could go and get care. Now, of course, now that we have the federal government looking after us, they're talking about death panels. I never heard about death panels when this was being taken care of at the local level, but once you let the federal government control it, why, of course, whatever the government controls, it will eventually destroy. And we're talking about human lives and human beings. And the death panels are there. They're already beginning to cut back on the availability of health care for senior citizens. They already have end-of-life care in hospitals across America. And when they say it's end-of-life care, that means it's the end of your life. I'm not talking, simply imaginary. I know of a number of people who've been started on those morphine drips even though they didn't have any pain, because it was the end of life. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, you're absolutely right. You're a doctor, you know that. And they want to get rid of us all who have chronic diseases, or we get ill, and it's going to cost government a fair amount of money over a 4 or 5 year period, and they just tell the doctor, we're handling this from here on out, and this is what you're going to give them, and if you argue, go to jail.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is happening because the good people haven't been involved, but we are all involved, and people are going to have to get educated and start organizing locally on a block by block, precinct by precinct basis. Start taking back your local communities, start figuring out how you're going to help the people who really need to be helped, but make sure that they have to work for their help. Don't give them something for nothing, because, of course, that destroys their integrity. It's the worst thing you can do, is give people something for nothing. What we need is charity, not entitlements or welfare. Well, Bob, certainly right here in California, I think we're going to have some very real problems. I think they're going to start in the next couple of months. I do believe that because they're going to destroy our economy with all these new rules and regulations as far as CO2 emissions. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they've been working on that sort of thing for years, and I don't know what they're going to do about it.
Well,
what are we going to do? Shut down the whole state?
Well, basically, they're going to make it very difficult for industries, to do anything that produces carbon dioxide. Certainly, if you have a fleet of diesel trucks, you're going to have to get new trucks because they're polluting the environment. And, of course, diesel fumes were bad, no question. But they didn't go after them years ago. But now, of course, they're making impossible requirements. And I think an awful lot of trucking concerns and others with big, heavy trucks are simply going to pick up and leave California.
Well, it's bad enough in that industry as it is. And, of course, the industry delivers probably 70% of what people need. And when that happens, your supermarkets are going to be empty.
Well, I know that some of the big food chains are having real problems right now. I see that A&P is actually closing down. I mean, Atlantic and I've forgotten, Atlantic and Pacific or whatever it is. I've forgotten. But anyway, AP stores has certainly been a tradition in America. And they got about 150 branches across America, stores, and they're closing down. I think we're going to see a lot more of our stores closing. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're right about that. And they can't compete. They just can't compete. There's going to be less and less outlets. They've driven, they being Walmart, has driven all the small mom and pop and medium-sized markets out of business, not only in the United States, but in every other country they've gone into.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment here. Well, Bob, you've got 3 minutes to wrap up today's program.
Well, we haven't talked about gold today, so I think we'll do that.
All right, fine. And basically, of course, they've knocked it down there. It looked like it was up over 1,400. They got it way down. It was back pretty well today. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I had it up and down 3 or 4 times, and the good guys won in the end. The outside market was up 550. The spot market was up around 650, and silver was up between 21 and 35 cents, so it was a real good day, although it was a thin day because of the season, same with the stock market. And I think you're going to see some more light pressure on the stock market between now and the end of the year. And I think you're going to see upward pressure on gold and silver and commodities. Commodities hit a new high today, and they're going to keep on hitting new highs. And one of the things that we didn't have in the immediate past, except for time to time, was the big move we've seen in the last 4 to 6 months, which happened in the food sector, which is beans and grains and even cotton and copper. Copper hit a new high today. And so I think that is going to be an ongoing thing. I think we've got another, perhaps 5 years in both markets minimum where they're going to continue to go up. Gold, silver, commodities are going to be the only place that you can safely hide what wealth you have. And there is no replacement for that as a method of investing. And so you've got to be there if you have any money at all. And you're going to need it later because it's going to get nasty. Maybe it won't lead to riots and revolution, but it certainly is going to lead to a lack of food and a lack of the ability to be able to take care of yourself.
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. Certainly, I don't know if you've seen Gerald Celenti's latest predictions. I don't know whether he has any insight, but if he's been fairly accurate in the past, and he is very pessimistic about this coming year. So I think it would be fascinating. I think people just have to tighten the seatbelt and get ready for difficult times. Bob, we'll talk to you this evening, and looking forward to it. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and I hope you enjoy our conversations with Bob Chapman. He was just simply saying that he thinks gold and silver are going to continue going up. It's going to be up and down and up and down. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, China has started a massive program of accumulating gold, as have the Arabs, as have people in other nations throughout the world. People in Europe are buying gold because they realize, because the whole world monetary system is coming down, you're going to have to begin making preparations for the very difficult times that lie ahead. Bob was just saying that the major commodities, copper and the other major commodities, are rising, and of course this foreshadows an inflationary spiral in America. And of course Ben Bernanke knows what he's doing is not going to work. And he made a statement on 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago. He was 100% sure that he could stop inflation in 15 minutes. And he is absolutely lying. He knows what he's doing is going to bring inflation, and eventually it'll get to be hyperinflation. We're talking maybe 20% a year or something like that. But that begins to simply destroy quickly, a matter of 2 or 3 years, the value of people's life savings. I don't think we're going to get the Weimar type of Republic inflation, but I do believe we're going to have inflation here. But the real purpose is to destroy the infrastructure of this nation and impoverish our people. And if you doubt that, you're going to have to read my latest newsletter. It'll be available in a couple of weeks. Or go to your library and read the article by Richard Haas, Haas, the President of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's the November-December issue of Foreign Affairs magazine. You may be able to buy it at a bookstore. Read it through 5 times and try to understand what he's saying. He's saying we're going to have certainly lower living standards. We're going to simply make it extremely difficult for people here. He uses the term austerity over and over again, and lower living standards over and over again. And what they're talking about simply is destroying the middle class in this country. They know what they're doing. They did this in Rhodesia. Henry Kissinger, the U.S. State Department, the Brotherhood of Darkness destroyed the infrastructure of a first world nation. We call it Zimbabwe today. Half the people have fled. And remember, America has controlled that since 1980 when we installed this Marxist thug. Exactly as we did in Cuba, we brought Fidel Castro to power. If you doubt that, you need to get my DVD, The World Revolution. There you'll see my interview with the American ambassador to Cuba, Earl Smith, and he will tell you the State Department knew Fidel Castro was a communist. The CIA knew Fidel Castro was a communist, and we brought him to power. Why would we do something that foolish? Why would we create the best enemy money could buy? And, of course, Fidel's a very good friend of David Rockefeller's daughters. If you doubt that, we have David Rockefeller's memoirs. Get the information. Prove me wrong. Basically, there's a small group of people who control the wealth of the world. You need to get Professor Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, and read what he says about the central banks. Read about what he says about how the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds control the wealth of our nation. The book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. And, of course, you can get the summary of that from Gary Allen. It's called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. They're all available from Radio Liberty by calling 1-800-544-8927. And then, of course, we hope many of you out there will want to get my talk on the financial Armageddon, my talk on the financial tsunami. There's syllabuses, both of them, but they will give you an inkling of what's happened, why it's happened. This whole financial crisis has been created. Ben Bernanke, when asked why he didn't move in and save Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers collapse, when of course they would have stopped the collapse of our whole economy, said, I didn't have the authority. I didn't have the right to do that. And yet now we find out that starting in 2007, he was giving money to foreign corporations, not even to banks. He was giving it, of course, to foreign banks too. And he was giving it to American banks. He was giving money to Toyota. What does that have to do with America? It has everything to do with America because the American corporations own Toyota, the American banking interests. The Brotherhood of Darkness owns Toyota, and they own, of course, General Motors and Ford. And understand that there's a small number of people, about 1% of the people, that control 42% of the wealth in America. Pray for Radio Liberty.
Right now, somewhere just over, I did look at the tax tables, but...
Well, there's Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story, hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that's going to determine what the future will bring. I have to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, hopefully, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman, if I can get my producer to pass him over here so we can get going. But we're going to be talking about what's really going on financially throughout the world, because, ladies and gentlemen, there are real problems, and what most people don't know and what you're not learning through regular channels is that other countries are simply coming in and buying up American corporations. The old adage is, if you lend money to other countries, you rule over them. You borrow money from other countries, why they rule over you, and America is the largest debtor nation in the world today. Basically, of course, the Brazilian companies have bought Anheuser-Busch. They bought Burger King. They're buying Pilgrim's. They bought Pilgrim's Chicken. They're in the process of buying other meatpacking companies and Sara Lee. They're being considered at the present time. As of about 5 or 6 years ago, almost 25% of our major corporations were owned by foreign companies. China and 3 or 4 other countries have invested $135 billion in America in recent years, buying up American corporations. And that's what happens when, of course, you have an organized program, this program of globalism intent upon transferring America's wealth to other nations. With us this evening, Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. Hi, Bob. How are we doing?
Well, pretty good. Nice to be here this evening.
All right, fine. Well, why don't you bring us up to date on what's going on in the world?
Well, those people out there who own all those dollars, they're coming back and they're buying the companies and they're managing them, and they're shipping most of the jobs to their own countries.
And, of course, any benefits that come from it, any financial benefit, they're going to keep for themselves. They're not going to, of course, to invest the money here. They're going to take the money back to their own countries. And what we're doing is really simply stripping America of its industries. Those that are not being sent overseas, and I'm talking about they've intentionally sent over, our smokestack industries, our steel industry, our electronic industry, our agriculture industry, large parts of our automotive industry, the aluminum industry. Certainly the light bulbs are all going to be produced in China from now on, and now, of course, we're allowing them to come in and simply buy up our countries, our companies, and the average American has no idea that this is a planned program to impoverish the American people. Go right ahead, Bob.
Well, it's to destroy the infrastructure in the United States, and it's being done in Europe as well, because these are the two regions where people are the most difficult to convince that they should want world government. And that's what it's all about. And they're going to continue to do that as long as we allow them to.
Or until we, of course, agree and all right, just we'll give up our freedom, we'll give up our sovereignty, just get things back to the good like they were before, give us prosperity back. We'll give up everything we believe in, we'll accept your rule, just be nice to us. And trouble is, they're not going to be nice to us because these are nasty people and they are intentionally destroying this country.
Well, that is for sure. And it's sad that people don't realize what they're up to. And when you tell them, most of them just aren't interested. And what's going to happen is that one of these days they're going to wake up with lots and lots of people with no jobs. And the country will become a second or third world nation. And they'll say, well, what happened to me?
Right, and here in California, they're talking, we're going to have to just close down a lot of the prisons, there's not going to be any money. Jerry Brown's got to put in an austere budget and bring chaos to California. So we'll give him more money. Well, you go ahead and pick up this story there.
Yeah, and that's so typical of the bankers. And what they're doing is the same thing that's being done in the countries in Europe, which is being done with the states. And we see that in California. And I think, you got to look at Brown's background. Of course, the last goofball they had in there did virtually nothing, could do nothing. But in part, the power of the liberals in the House and the Senate in California is pretty great. And but if you look at Brown's background, I've met him many times, and I knew his father, Pat. And Pat was a consummate old kind of machine politician. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to see another side of Brown. His family, his sister is involved with Goldman Sachs. And I think you're going to see them move in and get their hands on everything that's not nailed down. And I think that's part of the plan. And the woman, who was the woman who ran against him?
Let's see.
Meg Whitman?
Meg Whitman, yeah.
Yeah. She was former director of Goldman Sachs.
Right. And so basically Goldman Sachs on the Republican, Goldman Sachs on the Democrat side. Which do you want?
Yeah, that's right. And so it's same-o to, to control both sides of the action. Simple as that.
Well, because
what they always do.
California is very important. Before Arnold Schwarzenegger was allowed to run for the governor's position here, and because at that time we were the sixth largest economy in the world in California, why they had to take him over to be cleared by Lord Rothschild. And Lord Rothschild, leading so many of the major banks in the world today, owning controlling interest in almost all 10 of the major banks in the United States, at least significant interest in all of the major banks through Barclays and State Street Bank. The average individual really doesn't understand. Arnold had to be cleared before he could run. I'm sure they ran Meg Whitman. They knew exactly where she was coming from, and probably Jerry Brown as well. Well, we'll be back in just a moment with Bob Chapman as we analyze what's really going on financially. Give us a call if you'd like. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest this evening, Bob Chapman for the International Forecaster. Our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. If you have a question or you have a comment, why, give us a call. Well, Bob, certainly gold has been holding up fairly well. It almost got to $1,400 an ounce, backed off to about, $365. It's come back, though, fairly well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, and it's starting to move back up again, and it'll continue to do so. They've lost the war. They continue to win battles along the way, although it's sort of a hit-and-run situation. and they've been very unsuccessful as of late, really keeping gold from going forward. But it's been the case actually for the last 10 years. So I expect that the power of government over the prices of gold and silver will continue to lessen over a period of time. And there's going to be a great deal of financial dislocation. You've got the nations of Europe, now there's 6 of them in serious trouble, all of whom are in the Eurozone. For those who don't know, there's 16 Eurozone members out of 27 that are in the European Union. And so I think you're going to see trouble there. I think you're going to see the euro go. I think probably the European Union will break up, and I don't think it'll take too long. And then in the United States, if anybody has seen, and I did not see this, the 60 Minutes program that they had on Sunday with Mr. Christie, who's the governor of New Jersey. John Corzine was the previous governor who bought his election. Former head of Goldman Sachs. He left the state with $10 billion in debt, and so Mr. Christie inherited it. And he said, "Look, we got problems. We're going to keep it on cutting, and that's just the way it is. I don't have money to pay these people, and there's many other states in the same position." And then Meredith Whitney, who's a bank analyst and very well thought of in Wall Street, and she said, this is going to be as big, this municipal problem of not being able to pay debts is going to be as big as the housing problem.
And she's talking about municipal bonds, right. County bonds, and state bonds, and that a lot of these bonds are really going to default. I mean, she said, they say they can't default, but they can default.
Of course they can. And what's going to happen? Many towns and cities and counties and states are just simply going to go bankrupt. And the services which they provide will abruptly stop. And it's just really, for the most part, just pure incompetence. Everybody thought that the beautiful music was going to play forever. And that's not the way life is.
But
we've been writing about this for years. I got people out of municipal bonds 3 years ago when I saw that AMBAC and the other company, I can't remember their name, that whole insurance thing was a scam. And a municipality, say, with a BBB rating would go to AMBAC and I'd say, we want you to insure our bonds. So AMBAC was able to use their AAA rating and bring down the rate which they had to pay for money. And AMBAC supposedly was insuring them. Well, AMBAC didn't have hardly any
it didn't have any money.
Financial basis to be able to protect all these municipalities. It was a Ponzi scheme. And so they've gone under. Their insurance is gone. What's the next thing? The next thing is that the bonds revert back to the original rating. When they have that rating, they lose the face value of the bond. And say the bond was selling for $1,000, it might go to $900 or $850. And look what the position that they're in.
Well, my understanding is that a lot of insurance companies and pension funds can't hold these bonds if they don't have a AAA rating. So they're going to be in a position to have to dump them. If they dump them, they're going to dump them at a loss, and the people who are going to buy them, are going to have a real incentive to want to buy them. And who'd want to buy a bond that might very well default? You're going to have to get that price really down before people are going to buy them.
Well, I'm seeing it happen right now. I see an estate that I know about, and they have some municipals in it, and they're just taking a shellacking going up, but they have to. It's either that, maybe, or nothing. And one of the interesting things is that the bank that was involved in the trust, that was it was within the bank structure that they had it in one of their vehicles, and they don't even want to tell the new person who was running the trust for a person who is approaching death. They don't even want to tell them what it's worth. And I said to the person the other day by email, who happens to live outside the country, I said, you've got to go and confront these people and tell them you want to be cashed out, and if not, you're going to the police. I mean, these bankers are crooks. I mean, you people got to listen. You know, for years and years and years, you thought the friendly banker was a great guy, blah, blah, blah. And what do you got for it? They're crooks. Not all of them, but lots of them. And do you see any big major banks going under? No, you don't. They're all small, a few medium-sized, but almost every one of them is small. Why? They want to nationalize the banking system, that's why. And they're letting them go under.
Well, I think that certainly the large banks, we consider them too large to fail, and of course they basically, as Elizabeth Warren, who was actually the professor from Harvard who was handling and analyzing the TARP funds dispersal, said, if a bank is too large to fail, it's too large to exist, and we should simply break them up. And I think she's absolutely right. Not that anything's going to happen, but there is no such thing as too large to fail. These banks who've been totally irresponsible certainly be done away with. They should certainly be forced to disseminate their assets and become much, much smaller banks. You cannot have banks that could threaten the survival of our society because of their size, because these banks, of course, really own the Fed, and the Fed is actually controlling our economy, and they are intentionally undermining the very fabric of our society. I think they're going to destroy the value of our bonds. I think they're going to destroy the value of our currency, and I think they are part of this program to bring austerity to America and to lower the living standards of the American people. Well, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Bob, aren't the interest rates going up on the bonds, so that, in other words, basically the interest rates are going up on the bonds and the value of the bonds is going down? What's happening with T-bonds and municipal bonds?
Well, we'll look at the 10-year note, which is the nearby long-term bond upon which the mortgage rates are predicated. And it wasn't but 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, the yield was around 2.5%, and it was trading at 3.55% not too long ago. And like last week, it closed at 3.35 today, 3.35%. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, in a very short period of time, a whole point was tacked on. Now, that's taken the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage via Freddie Mac's figures to about 3.85. The bank rate figure is about 5.11 approximately. And, of course, the Fed's fighting to keep it down. And, you know, what is the reason for the deterioration in the bond market, which had been really held up by the Federal Reserve, and obviously they couldn't handle it here in the last several weeks? I think that the owners of bonds are looking at the yield, and the yield is very low historically, and they're saying, I think we're going to see a lot of inflation in the future. And a lot of inflation means a devaluation of the money that's being paid, you know, by the bond. And so if you're getting 3.5%, let's say, and the government says inflation's 1.2%, and then you move up and you look at the real inflation rate of 6 to 7%, you're losing 50% of your money yearly. And so I think the realization is there now. They're getting out, and interest rates are going to go up, and they're going to stay up. How high? It's hard to tell right now.
Well, I think we're living in very difficult times because basically what can people do with their money? Put it in the stock market? I mean, the stock market is very uncertain. Put their money into bonds. Put their money into annuities or insurance policies. Where can you put your money where, of course, it's going to maintain any value at all? And, of course, that gets what Bob has been talking all along about, the value of gold and silver or gold and silver assets. If you have a question, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. Well, our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman for the International Forecaster. We're talking certainly about what's happening to the municipal bond market. But I think even more important is what's happening to the gold and silver market. And basically, we're finding out that China has increased their consumption of gold really considerably this last year. But other countries are already increasing the amount of gold that they're buying. And they seem to be accumulating gold. Not only the Chinese government, but the Chinese people are putting gold aside, because the Chinese people are pretty smart, and they realize, of course, that paper money is just that. It's paper money. It can hold value or it can lose value. And if it loses value, then what happens to your hard work? And so I think that people all across the world, I've even heard that people are buying up gold and silver over in Europe. Have you heard, Bob?
Well, first of all, Chinese citizens have only been able to buy gold for the last couple of years. And, that's a real pent-up demand. 1.4 billion people will assume that 750 million or 700 million are adults. And so that's a lot of buyers. And that's probably 2.5 times what there is in the United States. So, yes, they've been accumulating it. Chinese government's been buying all the gold production, and they are the biggest gold producer in the world today. The Russians are doing the same thing. Yes, there's heavy buying in Europe. It's been going on for, I'd say, 2.5, 3 years. And I've talked to dealers in Europe, and they can't keep gold and silver inventoried easily. There's a lot of demand, but we don't see this kind of demand in the United States. Yes, there's buyers, but not what there should be. It is actually very disappointing because people just don't get it in America. A good reflection of that was the last election. I mean, they should have thrown out half the incumbents. They didn't do it. They simply didn't do it. We replaced 14% of those who ran in the Senate and the House, most of them in the House. And we're looking at 1/3 that retired, maybe because they thought they'd get beaten, but that's not the point. 14% is not enough. It very simply is not enough. And here we are hanging on by our fingernails trying to make changes. And the Republicans go in during this time where we have this, we'll call it lame duck session, and they make deals with the Democrats to allow funding for the health reform. And health reform is a Stan, you tell him. You're a doctor. Tell him how bad it is.
Well, I think the Obamacare is going to be a disaster. But my understanding is that they really did not fund that. They had a temporary spending bill until the 1st of January, and then they're going to perhaps go ahead and create a situation where, although the Obamacare is the law of the land and they can't repeal it because the president will veto any legislation, what the Congress can do is just not fund Obamacare, and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen here. 1st of January. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest is Bob Chapman. Our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. And Bob was simply talking about the whole idea that we did not really replace enough of the congressmen, and we didn't, but it was a good start. I mean, with 60 new congressmen there, the 60 new Republican congressmen there that we didn't have before. It's a step in the right direction, Bob. I wish it had been better, but I'm glad for
but
what we got.
Stan, they made a deal that they were going to fund it.
I thought that they basically broke the deal. Now, I could be mistaken on that.
Oh,
Maybe somebody could
when
actually...
did that happen?
Oh, basically what happened was that Mitch McConnell got up and said that he wasn't going to go along with this funding. They were going to come up with a funding
When was
bill.
this?
About a couple of days ago. And basically they
I
said...
hope you're right, because this is a monstrosity.
Oh, I know it really is. But see, basically all the Republicans can really do is simply not fund it. In other words, they're going to start hiring people and setting up the bureaucracy. But if the Republicans say, we're not going to provide the money for it, why then, of course, it will simply die on the vine for the next 2 years. And then, of course, hopefully there'll be a Republican president who will veto Obamacare and put an end to this abomination, as it were, because basically Obamacare is going to be a system of cutting back on care for the elderly under Medicare. Now, basically, Medicare is a disaster. Something's going to have to be done. But what we need, of course, to do is to set up a two-tiered system. Right now, as a senior citizen, I cannot go out and buy a health care program for myself here in the United States. It's illegal for any company to sell me a medical care system, so I could be sure I would not fall under the influence of the death panels. And those death panels have been set up, and they're going to begin rationing access to health care. The only thing Obama has ever said that was really true was what he said, there is no way to get spending in the United States under control unless I can control Medicare spending. Now, how can you control Medicare spending? Why, you ration access to health care. That's what it's all about. That's what the Obamacare is really about, is rationing health care to the elderly. Well, I don't think we should ration health care to the elderly. I think we ought to return the responsibility to the local community and find a means of funding it locally and do away with all of these federal programs which are going to lead to the death and the necessary death of so many people. In fact, right now the FDA and the EPA said the FDA is releasing a lot of medicine that does far more harm than good, and the EPA refuses to enforce its own rules, and it's allowing the fluoridation of water with hydrofluosilicic acid that is killing people and lowering the intelligence and lowering the fertility, and we could go into aspartame and the dozens of things that the EPA and the FDA are doing to damage and destroy the health of the American people, and that's a whole program on its own. But right now, let's go to Dean, who's calling, because he has a question for Bob Chapman. Hi, Dean. How are you doing?
Very well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Do you have a question for Bob?
I absolutely do. Listen, I was listening to a interview with Ron Paul, and he said that he wanted to make gold and silver legal tender, and I wonder what would that do to the price of gold and silver if it was made legal tender.
And basically what he's talking is a parallel monetary system. In other words, you can use paper or you can use gold and silver. It's your choice, but they'll both be legal tender. What would that actually do, Bob?
Bad money drives out good, and so no one would want to take paper. That would be the final analysis. So what this is doing, what he is doing, by speaking in such a way, is that he's saying you're going to have to back the dollar again with gold and silver, or one or the other or both. And this is the box he's trying to force them into. And that's a box they don't want to be in. And he's going to be very subtle about what he does. He's planting all these seeds, and he's got them running in a number of different directions because they know how real dangerous he is to them, and he's quite well aware of the fact that they'll probably try to kill him, and he's really sticking his neck out. Of course, he's an elderly man, like you and I, Stan. And
he's younger than I am, that's for sure. But
he's 2 months older than me. So
he's a very, very, very courageous individual, and we can really thank him for the fact that we have the ability to own gold. I mean, back about 1970. Why, I've forgotten exactly when it was, but somewhere in that time, he actually got legislation passed so that Americans could actually own gold coins. And now, of course, those gold coins that they were buying, at $100 an ounce, and now, $1,400 an ounce. Dean, anything else you wanted to ask? I guess we lost Dean. Well, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing the demise of the American monetary system. Prepare for the worst. Dr. Stan and Bob, one of our guests, had called and asked about investing in something called TBT. That's TBT. That's an inverse bond ETF. Would that be a good thing to do if you anticipate the price of bonds are going to fall? And I think you probably have a certain amount of leverage on that. So you'd leverage your investment if the price of bonds fall. What would you think of that?
I, under no circumstances, will recommend ETFs. I don't think that ETFs are suitable for probably 98% of the public. And I think they're dangerous, they're leveraged, and I don't think you should be doing that unless you get a lot of experience trading and in the stock market and commodities and Forex. I like to keep people away from those things. When I was a broker, except when people had option accounts, and I didn't have too many of them, I would not open margin accounts. I was doing gold and silver shares, and there's enormous leverage in them naturally. I mean, why do we think that some gold and silver producing companies went from $1 to $400? Some of them went from 25 cents to $55, et cetera, et cetera. Because it doesn't cost much more to produce an ounce of gold, whether gold's $1,000 or $2,000 an ounce. Well, there's inflation in there, and if you have an inflationary atmosphere, but still, the leverage is unbelievable, and you don't have to use margin. So I never use margin. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend ETFs because of the leverage. I don't think the average person understands what they're getting into, and I don't think it should be done, period.
All right, fine. We'll be back here in just a moment. Our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. We'll get to Will just as soon as we get back. Hold on just one moment there. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and of course we have Will calling from Missouri. But before we get to Will, Bob, I want you to tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the International Forecaster, which comes out twice a week and really has all the information you need to know about what's going on. I look forward to it twice a week. Go ahead.
The International Forecaster is about on business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world. We publish by email on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Runs around 40 pages each time. We have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And everything that you need to know every week is in that publication. You can get a free introductory copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternational, FORECASTER.com, or www.intforecaster.com, intforecaster.com, or you can give us a call. You can email us if you have a question. We answer everyone, and we're looking at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com, Bob at intforecaster.com, or you can call toll-free 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188 to get your free copy.
All right, fine. Well, let's go to Will, who's calling from Missouri. Will, are you listening on the Internet? How are you hearing us?
I'm certainly listening on the Internet this evening, Dr. Stan, and I have a simple question, I think, for Bob, in that I'm interested in finding out the top stockholders on various companies, for instance, J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, or Citi. I went up on the SEC website, wasn't able to make a lot of progress there. Is there one place in particular, Bob, which you might be able to recommend where we can go to find the top stockholders in various corporations?
Yes, there are. Actually, there's services that do that, but I don't know where to point you to go to. Also, you can contact the companies, and they will know who the large shareholders are, and they will in turn email them to you. They're usually institutions, not usually individuals. Sometimes, but usually they're institutions.
So that's something that they would just perhaps freely just reply in regards to my inquiry.
Yes. I think most companies would be happy to do that. We just say, I want to, know who the large institutional shareholders are. They'd be happy to tell you.
Would you think that a lot of those might be Barclays Bank or State Street Bank?
I think that both of those are on the top of my list.
Okay.
That's why I'm looking, Dr. Stan, because I think Barclays and State Street are probably in the top 5, if not in closer to the top position in all those banks I just listed.
What are your thoughts on that, Bob?
I have to be honest, I don't know.
All right, fine.
From time to time, I do see some of the institutions, and quite frankly, I would rather not see institutions owning a stock. Now, you probably say, well, gee, why would you want to think that? I mean, doesn't that help the company by having, USA Gold, a mutual fund to buy gold stocks? Wouldn't that be good if they owned it? Generally speaking, yes. But what you're faced with here, and you got to remember, I was a trader for 25 of the 28 years I was a broker. I ran my own brokerage firm, number of employees, etc. And I found that it's a problem when you have institutions. Why? Because when they sell, it's devastating. They hit the bids indiscriminately.
Well, Dr. Stan and Bob, I don't know whether you took the time yet to look into it, but on the disclosures put out by the Federal Reserve, when they acquiesced to the pressure due and they put out their Excel sheet with some 21,000 entries of who they gave the monies to, what I've basically been doing is working with Excel trying to sort and get the top recipients. and this is part of the cross-referencing that I'm doing, trying to put this list together. But
well, when you get it, why don't you give us a call, okay?
Okay, I certainly will.
God bless. Let's go to Judy in Tri-Cities with a question for Bob. Again, our number 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Hi, Judy. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for my son. He has invested in physical gold and silver.
Just speak up a little bit louder.
Okay, he has invested in physical gold and silver, and he also invested in a Kitco pool account of virtual gold and silver. Is that a good investment? And if not, what would you suggest?
He has a certificate for gold or silver in a pooled account?
Yes.
Absolutely never.
Okay, what would be a better...
Because I've seen more of them go out of business. I've seen a half dozen guys go to prison. The temptation is enormous. I would get out of it as quickly as I could.
And what
you buy gold and silver coins, bullion, shares, depending upon what's suitable for you, how much risk you can assume, and that's it.
Okay.
You don't go in a commodity market, you don't buy derivatives, you don't buy options, etc. Period.
Okay. Anything else, Judy?
No, that'll do it.
Okay, fine. Let's go to Joe, who's calling us from Michigan. And what part of Michigan are you calling from, Joe?
I'm calling from Howell, Michigan, which is it's close to Flint. That's where your station is.
Okay.
But I'm listening online. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, anyway, do you have a question for our guest? Once again, our number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. But go right ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just a couple here. First is, okay, I heard you say, Bob, on a previous show that oil is not a good idea just because if the stock market goes down, then oil is going to go with it. My question is, let's say the stock market goes down, but let's say there's a threat of war or war in the Middle East. Will not oil still go up? Or?
Yeah, I would think oil would go up.
Okay.
It's a dicey situation because you can see it go down and not supposed to go down and shouldn't go down. And let's say it's $100 a barrel. It should hold up, but it won't unless some event happens, like you just mentioned, problems in the Middle East. And those problems in the Middle East would tend to make it reverse and run against the market. But for how long? 3 weeks? 3 years? You don't know.
Right.
And so there's a big risk there. But oil and gas usually run with the market, and they have in recent years. Example, major oil companies got pasted for like 30%, which is very high. When the market corrected a couple of years ago on the Dow down to 6,600, and yes, lots of companies went down 60-70%, but oil companies are large; they have big assets, etc. And but they still went down. So there's your proof.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other thing, I just want to share this with you guys. What would you say? I mean, this was really my girlfriend. My girlfriend has a brother who he's very well respected in his family. He's an accountant, and I sent him the International Forecaster, and I'm going to tell you what he said now. Believe me, I totally respect you, Bob, but he read it. I don't know if he read the whole thing, but he read part of it. And he's the kind of guy, who just looks at things. I think he looks at them on the surface in terms of reading the news and watching TV. He said that guy's a crackpot.
Well, you know something? I share his opinion. I always thought there was something a little funny about me.
Well, the thing is,
in fact, all bright people are a little weird. But with that said, and I like poking fun at myself, it's not unexpected. I had a letter the other day. My brother-in-law is a economist, And he says that Paul Krugman's got all the answers, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. And if they don't want to listen, they don't want to look, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think,
Joe,
that
want them all, and I don't let it bother me at all. It's just that they don't see the things that I see. And unfortunately for them, for the past 21 years, I've been right 98% of the time.
I know.
So it would be thoughtful of them if they gave me a little bit more consideration.
And I think, Joe, there's a lot of people who thought that Bob was crazy, but now they're afraid he's not. Okay?
Right. I agree. Well, God bless you.
Thanks so very much. Appreciate that. And let's go to Tony calling from calling from San Jose. Our telephone number, however, is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. And Tony's an old friend. Hi, Tony. How are we doing?
SoCal, Spokane, San Jose.
All right. Okay. Do you have a home in San Jose now too?
Well, we have what I guess would be considered a permanent residence. Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, it's good to have you back locally. Anyway, what can we do for you? Do you have a question for our guest?
Yeah. I listen to Bob all the time and appreciate what he says. The other night I was listening to Lindsey Williams on Alex Jones, and he is saying that his Mr. X fella, somebody from, before he died, told him that basically what was going to happen was that the euro was going to collapse, and then within a few weeks the dollar would collapse after that. And I was wondering what Bob thought, that this was something that is on the radar. And if the dollar were to collapse, does that necessarily mean hyperinflation?
Well, first of all, I don't think Lindsay said when the euro was going to collapse. He said a few weeks after the euro collapsed that the dollar would collapse. So anyway,
exactly.
Basically, what are your thoughts on that, Bob?
Well, first of all, I've been trained in business and economy. I've owned a brokerage firm and been in the financial area for many, many years. And there's very few people who write newsletters today or go on radio who have the background that I have. Mr. Lindsay was a chaplain. I didn't know that he had been trained in economics and finance. So what he's doing is he is repeating information from a third party. And so that's not his ideas. It's the ideas of somebody else. And I think he should make his own decisions, firstly. Second of all, he says the oil price is going up, and there's a good possibility of that. The reason why, and he says rightly so, that his friend has told him that the oil producers would like more for their product. And I think he's right. And I think that a higher price is justified. I mean, the price of everything else has gone up. Now, I didn't know that Mr. Lindsay was an expert in international finance, which I am. And very often, he sounds like a parrot to me. And I think that him making those kind of guesses, and that's what they'd have to be considered, because Mr. Lindsay is not a financial person. I think maybe he should keep them to himself.
All right, Tony, do you have any other questions or comments?
Well, I guess the point of my question was this. There's a lot of difference between inflation and hyperinflation. Hyperinflation was where basically everybody just loses faith in the fiat currency, rather than a gradual diminishing of value. And if the dollar does have a major crisis, do you see? My question is: do you see continued inflation in the 8 to 15 or higher range, or do you see hyperinflation? That's really my question.
I think that inflation right now, if you use the 1990 figures from John Williams, who's the best, you'll find that inflation's somewhere between 6 and 7%. If you use the 1980 figures, John's got it at 8.25%. Our government says it's 1.2%. Our government has a terrible time trying to tell the truth. With that said, what do I think? I think by the end of next year we could easily see 14%, and that's, slides into the question that you had. Do you see it at 15%? Maybe. Do I see it at 14%? Probably. Where was it 3 years ago? Real inflation was over 14%, but nobody talks about it because we had deleveraging and the whole game changed. A once-in-a-lifetime kind of happening. But I think if that happens, and they can't get this thing straightened out, which they won't get it straightened out, the next move will be to higher inflation, QE3 or 4, whichever they want to call it. And what's going to happen there is that you're going to have even more inflation, maybe 28% or 30%. And that's when hyperinflation comes in. And you're right about hyperinflation. It's because people don't want to hold currency anymore. And that's why Ron Paul and people like myself are calling for a backing on the dollar of gold and silver, of both, so that they can't do that. And hopefully a termination of the present status of the Fed, which would be turned back to the Treasury Department, where we'd be able to see what they're doing. And of course it would be nice if they could shut the revolving door between Wall Street and the Treasury Department. But anyway, I think that's where this is headed, and I think it'll be followed by a deflationary depression. I mean, this is all classic. You don't have to be a genius to figure it out. All you have to do is read economic history. It's all there for anybody who wants to look.
Okay, Tony, does that answer your question?
Pretty good. I've got one more little one, though.
I think one of the important things is, what is inflation? What is a hyperinflation? Is hyperinflation 20%? Is hyperinflation 100% or 1,000%? So, I mean, these terms certainly can have many, many meanings. I think hyperinflation would be 2 or 3 or 4%, and that is inflation. Bob, at what point would you call it hyperinflation?
I don't know.
All right, fine. That's a good answer, because I don't.
Hyperinflation.
I don't think anybody does know the answer, but basically we'll be back in just a moment. Hang on there, Tony.
Thank you.
Tony, go ahead.
Well, from what I've read, hyperinflation is basically where people just lose total faith in the economy, and then then you go from the 14% range. You could get into the, Zimbabwe numbers.
Sure,
where nobody wants the currency.
Well, I think that the major thing is we have to define the term, and we often use terms we haven't defined them. And so, what would be hyperinflation to you might be simply just plain old inflation to me. But let's go ahead. Do you have another question?
Well, I want to answer that because I have a definition. Hyperinflation is a loss of faith in the currency. Prices rise in a hyperinflationary environment, just like in an inflationary environment, but they rise not because people want more money for their labor or for their commodities, but because people are trying to get out of the currency. It's not that they want more money; they want less of the currency, so they will pay anything for goods which are not the currency.
Okay, fine. Tony, have another question.
Well, that's my exact understanding.
Okay.
Bob just put it. Yeah, this is just asking for an opinion, I suppose. But now that Ron Paul is going to be in a position of some power in the House, do you see anything changing?
Hey, I do at the Fed. The Fed's going to be going crazy. I mean, he's going to be hitting them in questions one after the other. And if they try to stall him, he has subpoena power. He'll haul them all in there. And they know it. And they know that it's only a matter of time before there's a major confrontation between Congress and the Fed, which he's going to be the catalyst for. And I think he can take them down. And more people every day are learning what a bunch of criminals the Fed is and what they've been doing to this country for 100 years.
I think we're living in exciting times, Tony. Very.
Well, is there anything you can recommend as far as what we, citizens out here can do to, like help Ron Paul and, as far as to put some more heat on these banksters? I mean, and I'm going to listen to this.
Well, get a hold of Ron Paul and say, what's the first line of fire? How can I get in there and really help? Tell me, and I'll do it, and I'll get other people to do it as well.
And I think the most important thing is just to keep talking to people, to explain to them the Fed is a privately owned central bank. It's predominantly owned by the 6 major banks, and their allegiance is not to America. And all you need to do is read Richard Haas's recent article in Foreign Affairs magazine, and you'll know what they have in store for America, and it looks very, very bleak. I think the term that Mr. Zuckerman uses is gloom. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Tony, thank you very much for calling. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
Well, do you think they're going to maybe try and do a Congressman McFadden on Ron Paul, Dr. Stan?
Let's hope not. For those who don't know why they killed Congressman McFadden, the third time it was the charm. Bye-bye. Okay, and Bob, I want to thank you so very much for being with us. It's always a pleasure. We'll look forward to talking to you next week at the same times.
Well, thank you.
Good night. Have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll talk to you before the New Year.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's Bob Chapman. Hope you enjoy the programs, and I hope you learn from what he says, and I hope you're listening to his advice, and certainly begin to make preparations. We're moving into very difficult times. Well, this is the time I need to remind all of our listeners that we are primarily listener-supported, and if you're in a position to help us, we'd love to hear from you. I want to thank you personally, those who've helped. We did certainly get a good response to our request for help, and certainly we want you to know it's very much appreciated. Well, this is the time when, of course, I need to remind our listeners Radio Liberty is primarily listener-supported, and if you'd like to join the Radio Liberty family of supporters, if you'd like to get subscribed to the newsletter, our number is 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. You need to understand what's going on today. We have a little book on the Federal Reserve. It's called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy by Professor Sutton. Just a small little book, inexpensive and easy to read. We have The Creature from Jekyll Island. We have a book written in 1899 by a lawyer named Mr. Walther called The Coming Battle. And basically it's the statement that basically the banks are going to take over control of our government. Today the banking system controls our government. They're the ones who intentionally wreck this economy. They let Bear Stearns and Lehman go down. There were runs on both of those banks. Bernanke could have intervened. Oh, he didn't. He said, I didn't have the authority. I didn't have the authority to give money to the banks. And now we learn. He gave, starting in 2007, he started giving large sums of money to foreign corporations like Toyota, to American corporations like GE, to banks in Europe and banks in America. But they let Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers go down because they wanted to precipitate this crisis. You go back and read the newsletters I wrote in October and November and December of 2008, and you find out that it's all carefully planned. You need to get my talk on the financial tsunami with the syllabus. You need to get my talk on the financial Armageddon with the syllabus. You need to get our pamphlet on the history of money. The prophetic warning, which of course is the farewell address of Andrew Jackson in 1837. And then, of course, you need to get a pamphlet on the financial meltdown in 2007. Understand it's all planned. What they intend to do is impoverish the American people and create such chaos that we'll be willing to accept the one world government. And that's exactly what Henry Kissinger said in the January 2008 article that was published in the New York Times. It's called A Chance for a New World Order, A Chance for a New World Order. And then there's so much out there, ladies and gentlemen. This whole Islamic terrorist movement is a fraud. How could I say that? Why? Because Lord James rose in Parliament on the 3rd or 4th November of this year and talked about how he had spent billions of pounds to the terrorists, both in North Africa and in Ireland. The Irish Republican Army, of course, and Al-Qaeda would be in North Africa. Why would Lord James be sending billions of pounds to the terrorists? we created the best enemy money could buy. This whole thing was a fraud. Those people in the World Trade Center were murdered. Basically, the planes didn't bring down the building. There were explosives in them. Certainly, you can get the Richard Gage DVD, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. There are over 1,300 engineers and architects have signed a petition saying, we don't believe those buildings came down because of the plane crashes. It needs to be investigated. Ladies and gentlemen, the murderers are still out there. That's the Richard Gage's DVD. Our telephone number, 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-544-8927. Our webpage, radioliberty.com, and then please pray for America. Pray for our leaders, pray for our ministers, but pray for Radio Liberty, for our provision and protection.